technology encroached itself on us. But really, we have overcome a lot of pain and suffering. At least many of us have had that benefit. In my view, we are the species that seeks to go beyond our limitations. Some people would prefer to define humanity in terms of our limitations. But we're the species that didn't stay on the ground. We didn't stay on the planet. We didn't stay with the limitations of our biology. There's still a lot of pain and suffering in the world. But the same technology that can, let's say, alleviate the suffering of cancer or overcome cancer completely can also empower a bioterrorist to create a bioengineered virus that could be very destructive. And that's led to some controversial issues. For example, calls for relinquishment of technology. Bill Joy's essay in Wired magazine appeared to call for relinquishment of those dangerous technologies such as biological technologies and nanotechnology. He claims actually he was only calling for controls, but other people, like Bill McKibben, who brought to our attention global warming and has been a very capable and eloquent environmentalist, has called for relinquishment of broad areas of technology. In my mind, that, first of all, it would drive these technologies underground, where we would have even less control over them. The responsible scientists we're counting on to protect us would have less easy access to the means of protecting us. I think the real answer is to put conscious and attention on the defensive side of the equation. I've given some testimony to Congress that we should, for example, accelerate broad-spectrum anti-biological viral tools. We've done actually pretty well in terms of software viruses, and some people would disagree with that as well, but I don't hear calls for people saying, well, software viruses are so destructive, let's just get rid of the internet and start over again. We have gotten more benefit. And every time there's a new pathogen, there's a response, it's an augmentation of the technological immune system that we've developed to fight these software pathogens that emerges within hours or days. And it has been a very responsive system, and it will always be an uneasy standoff. But there's really no choice but to go ahead. The only way we could implement broad relinquishment would be a Brave New World totalitarian system. That was the whole point of that novel.
What about for the developing world? Your thinking on what's going to happen over the next 20 years, 40 years. I just was curious about what that means for the developing world.
It's a very good point. The developing world is developing, also at an accelerating pace. And technology typically starts out unaffordable and not working very well. Then it works a little bit better, and it's merely very expensive, and then it becomes inexpensive and works quite well, and ultimately is almost free and becomes ubiquitous and works extremely well. That's right now pretty much a 10-year process. You can see that in cell phones. I mean, 10 years ago, if somebody took out a mobile phone in a movie, that was a signal this is a member of the power elite, because only somebody very wealthy and powerful could have a mobile phone. You now have many nations and societies in Asia where most people were pushing plows 15 years ago, which now have thriving information technology, thriving information economies, and everybody has a cell phone. I gave the example of AIDS drugs earlier. What I call the law of accelerating returns, this doubling of price performance every year, is a factor of 1,000 in 10 years, and even that pace is going to grow, is a very powerful force to make these technologies improve in capability and reach a wider and wider audience. Because of that doubling of the paradigm shift rate, that 10 years will be 5 years in 10 years, and in 20 years it'll be 2 or 3 years to go through that whole cycle from early adoption of inexpensive technologies that don't work to very expensive technologies that don't work to inexpensive technologies that do work. At any one point in time, there's a lot more we can and should do. Millions of people have died of AIDS that could have been saved. There's a lot more we should be doing now. But this basically impersonal force of this law of accelerating returns, this doubling in price performance, this 50% deflation factor, is moving things in the right direction. And there were just statistics recently released by the World Bank that showed in most parts of Asia, there's been a reduction by half of poverty over the last 10 years. They're expecting another reduction by 75% over the next 10 years. In fact, all areas of the world except sub-Saharan Africa, because of the AIDS problem, have benefited. Hopefully, even sub-Saharan Africa can benefit, particularly with some of the initiatives which need more support.
Right. I also, too, wanted to ask, you were talking about the longevity, people living longer. The question I had was, are we as a society ready for people to start living that long? Can we handle that? And then can we as a planet, overpopulated as we are, handle something like that?
That's another good question that comes up. And it's important to take all of the different and not just take one trend on today's world as if nothing else would happen. If some prescient futurist were to say in 1900 that he or she foresees that whereas in 1900 a third of the population worked on farms, that futurist saw that by 100 years later that figure would be 2%. People say, my God, we're all going to starve. But other changes occurred, and because of improved technology, we're actually feeding much of the world with that 2%. These technologies that I talked about will generate substantial economic growth. Actually skipped over the economic slides. And not only economic growth in dollars, but in particular what a dollar can buy. In the 2020s, with nanotechnology, we'll be able to manufacture almost any physical product at almost no cost from very inexpensive raw materials and information processes that basically will rearrange the molecules in raw materials to create any end product, including food. There's some nano-engineered designs for solar panels and fuel cells that could really meet all of our energy needs. If we captured 0.03%, that's 3/10,000ths of the sunlight that falls on the Earth, we could meet not only today's needs, but the projected energy needs for 2030 without any other source of energy, engineered fuel cells. Now, we can't do that today because solar panels are very heavy, and inefficient, and expensive. But these new nano-engineered designs would be extremely inexpensive, very efficient, and lightweight, and we could easily capture the 0.03% of the sunlight and meet our energy needs. So these technologies are progressing at a far faster pace in the population growth that will result from life expectancy. I mean, right now, the first thing that happens when you have prosperity is population growth slows down. We have negative population growth in most of the advanced countries. That may reverse itself, and we'll have population growth again when we dramatically extend human longevity and the birth rate exceeds the death rate again. But population growth is going to be very slow compared to the dramatic growth of these technologies. Ultimately, when we can have all of manufacturing and all of energy as information processes that double their price performance every year, that's a doubling every year. That's much faster than the doubling rate of the population. So we'll be able to meet the physical needs of any conceivable size biological population.
I think at this point I'd like to invite people to come up. If you want to just form a line there at the microphone. And just again for our radio listeners, you're listening to Ray Kurzweil at Cambridge Forum.
Yeah, I was wondering whether what thoughts you may have had on some of the cultural and social ramifications of these developments, and in particular, I would, for instance, think about virtual reality. I mean, why would one want to travel around the world if one could possibly, get the appropriate electrical contacts into the brain to accomplish the identical sensations? Or more interestingly, even than that one, I would think the Holy Grail would be, ultimate virtual sex. Why would we want to have an institution like marriage or anything like that when one could have a different partner every night, each one more beautiful than the last one or something like that, and really experience the identical feelings?
Well, sexual applications actually have been important early adopter application for many communication technologies, starting with videotape and video conferencing and so on. And I'm sure that will continue. And it's actually